I mean, I think it's the truest, most, purest form of like generational wealth. And I can take the, the sweat equity that I put into in my lifetime and actually try to preserve that for future generations of my descendants, which is kind of a weird term. Even at that young age, what was it, like my late 20s, to like recognize the value of holding on to assets. Probably the greatest thing I ever did was we just didn't sell any of our houses.
Welcome back, everybody, to Retire.Army, where we talk about all things retirement and transition from the military, all walks of the military. Back again with Justin and catching up after a nice hiatus of a few weeks. So how's it going, Justin? How's everything been?
Things are going good. At the moment, at least the exact moment, I'm a little exhausted. I've been working all weekend trying to rip this old deck out on our house. It's probably about as old as me. So it's been a challenge. It's getting a little warmer. So, I ordered the dumpster for 3 days again. So I was really hustling and bustling to try to get this thing out. But, mission accomplished. So, ready to enjoy the work week. But yeah, no, it was nice to have a couple weeks off, just kind of re-energize, recharge. And then this last week is my first week back and just did a lot, hit it hard again. So yeah, just kind of try to, keep the momentum going, hitting my stride. Got a little sun, got a little, found out, the gender of our son. So that was pretty exciting. So no, it's good to be around family. It's good to kind of relax in the sun of Mexico for a few days. So yeah, just, I'm enjoying the sunshine. I absolutely love sunshine. So, kind of the doldrums of winter and overcast and rain. It's nice to kind of come out of that. So no, things are going good.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, like, this, now that you're kind of like on the downhill slope going out of the military and getting ready to retire, does leave and like vacation feel a little bit different this time around than it has ever in the past? Was it more like slower tempo? Was there anything that you noticed that was a little bit different on this vacation that you took versus any other?
Maybe. I mean, maybe. Obviously, I came back and my inbox was full of emails that need to be answered. But yeah, I mean, I think just kind of the mental pace in general has kind of slowed down. Like pretty soon, this isn't going to be my portfolio of things. Almost kind of getting like a senioritis moment, right? You kind of get a little, kind of trying to like stay focused for at least as the next 90 days or so to my replacement gets on board and I can start training him up. But yeah, so I mean, I would say, I got to relax a little more, maybe not, as intense about, like getting back to work and, trying to get caught up at everything. So yeah, I think so. I mean, it's, transition leave or, paternal leave is, on the horizon. It'll be here pretty quick. So.
And besides ripping the deck out, is there any other kind of like modifications you're doing to the house currently that are?
Oh geez, yeah, it's like another. Yeah, I mean, it's a never-ending project. I say that kind of jokingly. I mean, yeah, there's always going to be stuff to do. It's a 50-year-old house, but I mean, we do. I mean, I want to get some more paint on the walls. I do, we do got to get the baby's room done. But I mean, my first plan of action, just kind of psychologically, is just got to get the spare bed out of there. So I need to like put them on Facebook Marketplace, just to get it out of the house and, kind of motivate me to start working on that so we can repaint it and do some things like that. So yeah, there's stuff to do. I'm also getting to the point where I'm thinking about, maybe trying to outsource some of the work and not do it all myself. But so mostly right now would be painting, but there's some flooring and things. So yeah, I'll be in projects, or I have projects I could, latch onto for the foreseeable future. But we're also kind of contemplating now, eventually trying to turn this house into a rental and then moving somewhere else in the local area. But, at some point turning our primary residence into a rental. So kind of almost thinking of it from an investor standpoint where you can get the greatest return on your money and not basically like what's the word you look like, over rehabbing basically. So, but yeah, got lots of projects. But like I said, that deck was probably about as old as me. I remember I looked at the permits of last year and yeah, it was built sometime in the mid 80s. So it's time to go.
Do you have any advice for anybody who's maybe in that position where they're getting ready to transition out and they have the opportunity and the ability to take maybe a primary home and rent it out and then potentially move somewhere else, like if they're relocating somewhere else in the United States or whatever?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, I was fortunate because I mean, I look back, right? You're never smarter than you are today, right? Just every day we kind of improve off what we built the day before. So I mean, I was fortunate enough that I don't want to say dumb, but like I just, I guess even at that young age, what was it, like my late 20s, to like recognize the value of holding on to assets that can, kind of generate your net worth and grow your income. And so yeah, I mean, it was probably the greatest thing I ever did was just we just didn't sell any of our houses. So the first house I bought down in Grovetown outside Fort Gordon. It's actually almost been 10 years, as great as this thing. But yeah, it's bought a VA loan, paid full retail, but didn't have to put anything down. And then we've been for 2 years, rented it. And it's been cash flowing for the last decade. And, it's appreciated in value, paying down the mortgage. And I mean, it's a great wealth builder. And then we did the same thing right after that in Colorado Springs. So I would advise everybody. I mean, yeah, it can be a headache to be a landlord, but I mean, there's property management companies that'll take that. I mean, it'll cost you, but they'll take most of the burden off your hands. But I think investing in real estate, even passively, it is probably the easiest way for, I want to say, an ordinary type person to build wealth and financial freedom. So I always advise everybody, like, don't sell if you can. If you can afford to just rent it out, I mean, sometimes there's circumstances where you have to sell the house in order to purchase the next one, maybe. But if you can make it work, I mean, I think there's nothing but upside.
Yeah, and it's not just so super simple. I think I agree. I heard or read a quote sometime this week where it was like real estate is one of the only investments where you don't have to really be super smart to make money in real estate. You just have to be able to work really hard and grind it out and put in the hours and put in the effort. But you don't have to be like super duper smart. You do have to buy smart, I guess.
No, so and actually I realized that. So like, again, the very first house in Grovetown, right? So I was like in my late 20s. I'm like, I want to buy a house because before I moved there, I was in Fort Irwin Bachelor basically. But I was like, when I move to a place where I can actually buy a house, which is going to be outside Fort Gordon, it's like I want to buy a house. I want to be a homeowner. So what did I do? I wanted a customized house, like to the T. I wanted to design it, and so I got what I wanted, but I also paid through the nose, right? I was a retail buyer. So I paid a premium and it took, and it was, at the time it was the most expensive house in the neighborhood. And it took forever for it to actually like appreciate in value. And so I learned, I mean, I survived, right? It still cash flowed, it still appreciated over time. I was definitely not a savvy person. So it was not maybe I didn't get a bargain on it, but like it's still turned into an asset that's producing income and value. So yeah, you're 100% right. You do not have to be a genius. It's not hard. What's the term? I forgot what it's called. I don't know, something like it's not difficult work, but it's hard work. So, but yeah, no, I always tell everyone like whatever you can do, just try to hold on to your rental assets as long as you can. I'm trying to think like a wealthy person. That was kind of something I've kind of a mindset I've tried to develop the last month or so. I think things are finally starting to click for me.
What kind of insights are you coming across? Like what's really clicked?
Well, I mean, so no, I mean, so really, and actually, this is funny. I guess we could talk about this. So one thing that it really kind of happened after we found out Robin was pregnant was just kind of thinking about, okay, well, how do you actually plan an estate like properly, right? Like how do wealthy people plan their estates, right? Because if you think about it, you kind of got to think and kind of live your life about like around a group of people that you kind of aspire to be. So there's like two examples of people I know that ended up serving as kind of like executors for an estate for, you know, estates that weren't planned properly. So my mom had to was the executrix, I think, for my great aunt's estate who didn't have a will. And just her experience of the nightmare of trying to, settle all debts and, divide assets. And then my very best friend actually had to settle the estate for a family friend, and just it was a complete nightmare, right? And so I think most people just think like if you even if you just have a will, like it's everything's fine. Well, no, not really, because even if you have a will, you still have to go through probate, and that means you have to go through the court, and then everything can be contested, and it's a nightmare. And the will does not really solve that. So what do rich people do? Well, rich people actually set up trust, living trust. with the big benefit with the living trust is you don't go through probate. If you put everything in a living trust, that is one humongous burden that you're not living, to your spouse or your children or your descendants or things like that. So that's next kind of on my list of things. I actually have a call next week. So I'm just, kind of think like that, trying to think of, how do the most successful class of people kind of maintain their wealth and not even just maintaining your wealth, but how do you lower the burden, if something catastrophic were to happen to you tomorrow. Like if I got hit by a bus tomorrow on the way to work, like how can I put my family basically on the best path to success after I'm no longer here. So that's kind of the mindset I've been going through, and then just thinking into that more. I had read, I think like every investor probably has read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read that probably like 5 or 6 years ago, but just kind of trying to divide, or I'm not divide, but kind of identifying the difference between assets and liabilities. So I'm really trying to focus down on spending less money on liabilities. Obviously, like you have to buy food, you need a car, stuff like that. But like, how can you kind of limit what you spend on liabilities so you can actually purchase assets? And basically, what it comes down to is how to put yourself in a position so that your money is making money, and that's really ultimately how you gain wealth. Is when you buy assets, basically cash producing assets with your money instead of just spending it on, frivolous things that just kind of depreciate over time. So like obviously real estate's a huge one because almost kind of like the stock market, it goes up over time. That's just how it is because inflation's inevitable. So property prices are inevitable. They're going to go up. So if you can buy things like that, or, you can buy stocks and bonds too, those are going to go up over time as well. So just trying to focus on buying things that can produce cash on their own so that you don't get, killed with inflation and things like that. So that's kind of how I've just been shifting my mindset. And it's probably the last month or so really kind of clicked. And so I've really been kind of hammering down on that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's something a lot of veterans go through, even if they don't go to full retirement. Like after you spent so many years and you start to get a more tangible feel of like how fragile life is, especially if you deploy a few times and you go to like Afghanistan and Iraq and crazy places and see crazy things, you start to get a better appreciation of like life isn't really so long and you've got, a limited amount of time and you have to be prepared for insane things to happen because you actually never know. Like tomorrow you could get hit by a bus and things just happen. So you're right. I don't know the full ins and outs of trusts, but I know that trusts are one good way to shelter your assets so that banks and other entities can't come in and grab, even if you have like a business like an LLC or something like that, or S Corp or whatever, a C Corp. If you put some of the assets into a trust and wrap it, there's certain ways you can do it. And this isn't financial advice. This is not a financial podcast. So if you're listening, be sure to do your own research and talk to a lawyer and a financial advisor who's qualified. But there's certain ways you can wrap things in trusts and do specific things to protect those assets, even in the case of like getting sued. Somebody sues your company or something like that. Like there's ways to for them to not be able to pierce the veil. I think that's the vernacular that's used.
So, I've learned, you can structure a trust a million and one ways. It's up to you. And another concern is, say something would happen to, me and Robin when we're like traveling or something. Like I wouldn't want, our child or our descendants to necessarily just have immediate access to all our assets, right? Because when you're 18 years old and you're an adult, like you're not smart, you don't really have that much experience, and you could easily blow through that. Just like millionaire, people that win lottos, right? They blow through their money and they have to declare bankruptcy. So you can structure it, so they only receive a certain portion and kind of do it that way. So there's a million and one ways you can structure it. Honestly, it's almost like mind-boggling. I think, and I just think it's just lack of, you don't know what you don't know, so just lack of awareness, lack of information. But I really do think it's a way you can preserve wealth and not only provide benefits to your children, but your children's children and your children's children's children. And I think it's the truest, most purest form of like generational wealth is when you can take the the sweat equity that I put into in my lifetime and actually try to preserve that for future generations of my descendants, which is kind of a weird term. So, but yeah, no, you're right. And kind of a good segue to that is the other thing I've been looking at actually before I went on vacation was looking into, post-military life insurance policies because I think at least for most service members, it's just an easy, set it and forget it, SGLI, just covers it and you really don't have to think about, really anything at that point, right? As long as you have SGLI, they'll cover you in the service if anything happens. But now kind of thinking, okay, well, after that's over. So just kind of, weighing all the options. I, was on a couple different calls with a couple different agents and then also doing the comparisons between that. And then also, kind of, what do they call it? Survivor's benefits, which is essentially kind of like a life insurance policy that you'd pay out your pension. And so just kind of getting familiar with that so I can at some point kind of, pull the trigger and make a decision on what I want my post-military life insurance structure to look like and for how long. So yeah, just it's kind of morbid to think about like your demise, but you got to kind of protect your family. That's really what it's about. So
Yeah, no, that's really good. It's yeah, I mean it on one hand it's a morbid thought to think about, death and taxes and the two things that are most certain in life. But on the other hand, it's like once you actually go down that thought experiment and start thinking about it and trying to then backward plan from that and actually just coming to terms with it, like it's not a secret. Like you're born with a terminal illness and you're going to die at some point. That's the way life works. So just being comfortable with that and not being so taboo about it, and then you can backwards plan from that logically, and also figure out the things that will trip you up in the end. Like if something does catastrophically happen, God forbid, you've actually put some things in place, some barriers in place to shield your family, your children, your children's children. Like there's a lot of um, value in that. So I think it's a very good thought experiment, and the fact that you're actually going down the path and like checking off some check boxes of certain things and trying to figure out how to protect that nest egg that you've built.
I've got one final thing before we move on to a different topic. And so I've only shared this with a couple people. Um, just I don't know. For some reason in our society it's weird. It's taboo to talk about finances and money and things like that. So I remember. So I used to like write goals on the fridge, like just it's kind of like a subtle reminder of kind of long-term, short-term goals. And so this was when I was like at Fort Carson. So this would have been like 2013 to 2015. But like one of my goals really was like by the time I hit retirement, I wanted to be a millionaire. And so I check all our finances every morning, right? On Mint, I've got all our accounts synced to see what's going on. And I think it was like Tuesday or Wednesday because I check it every morning when I drink my coffee. And I looked and, we're not worth we're millionaires. So it's kind of weird to think. Yeah, it's crazy, right? So it was kind of a cool goal to accomplish, something that I've actually been working for, most of my adult life. And we were actually able to achieve that on the timeline that I wanted to. So yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, you just gotta, you know, hunker down, make wise investments, figure out what your goals are and basically, establish a plan and stick to it and it's achievable. So yeah, we've hit that milestone and now I'm kind of thinking my next goal is to 10x that in the next 10 years. I think that's achievable. So I'm gonna probably write that down and put that on the fridge so I can take a look at it. But yeah, it was something cool. I mean, it's just something cool. It didn't really change our lives, right? It was like a Tuesday morning. I was just sitting on my couch before I got ready for work, and I was like, "Oh, we did it! Hey, Robin, guess what? We're millionaires now." So it was pretty sweet. Yeah, exactly. So that was fun. But yeah. So just keep grinding.
Congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
Let me ask you kind of a weird counterbalance question to that. What are a couple things that you may have made decisions on that weren't so like it sounds like you wrote it down, you had like this sort of vision board on the refrigerator, which is actually a really smart thing, and it's been documented, well documented, that people can actually visualize and do things like that's what pro athletes do. That's what race car drive, like everybody in the pro levels of life seem to do that sort of same kind of thing. So from that vision board, like what did the action sequence look like after that? And like maybe it was just persistence upon persistence. And then what were maybe one or two decisions that you made in the context of that vision that maybe were not great decisions that kind of backfired?
So I'll have to think about the backfiring thing because I'm not I have to go back and try to remember. But I mean, so it was weird. I can't, maybe I read a book or I saw something. And so I had put, I was still in undergrad, right? And it was taking me a long time to knock it out because, I just wasn't really holding myself accountable, right? I'd start classes and maybe I'd drop them if I wasn't interested. So I wrote down, I think it was literally five each. It was five short-term goals, which would be like something to accomplish in the next year or two. I can't remember. And then like, so five short term, five long term, which were, I don't know, I think 5 years or more. And so I had just like little milestones. It was like, I want to graduate undergrad, or it might have been like this next semester with a, I don't know, 3.5 GPA or above. And, so things like that. I think there was something about like the PT test. Like I want to get a, 300 on the next ACFT, or I guess it was APFT at the time. And then I had the long term ones, like, the wealth thing, like, I want to finish a career at 20 years, to retire. I don't know if I had a rank on there. I might have. I don't know. I honestly don't remember. And then like the wealth thing, and I mean, it's just, I mean, you're right. It's because I think the biggest, at least for me, from my experience and kind of like what I understand is like, if you don't write it down, like, yeah, there's no accountability measure, right? And if you put out these goals, and goals are great because I think without goals, you're not going to, then there's nothing to achieve. But it's the goals, the important part, but I think is equally as important is the structure on how to get to that goal, right? And so I think the more detailed you can get with your plan, the easier it's going to be to actually follow. So if you just like throw out something broad, like I want to be wealthy one day, well, that's very broad. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean you have like $100 in your pocket? Does that mean you have $1 billion in your pocket? Like, you have to like be able to find like what your goals are and like how you're going to achieve them. So if you want to finish grad school or something, okay, what is that going to take? You have to take, one class per semester. You have to dedicate, 8 hours a week, whatever that is. And so I think the more detailed you can get into how you're going to achieve that goal, and then if you can put visual reminders for me on the fridge, because like when I'm like washing dishes or something, I'll glance around and you'll see it, or when I go to get milk out of the fridge or something, like you'll see it, right? So it's like a constant reminder. So if you just put like a very broad goal in the back of your head and you don't tell anybody, and then what happens if you don't do anything? Like, oh, I didn't study this week. Well, is anyone calling you out? Is anyone holding you accountable? No, because you didn't tell anybody and you didn't write it down. So therefore, you didn't fail because you didn't tell anybody. So it's almost, and so I wonder if it's almost like a mental thing. Like, oh, if I don't tell anybody, then if I don't achieve it, then there's no consequences. So I think it's just, I mean, really, it's just kind of holding yourself accountable by either like telling your spouse or telling your friends or telling your family, almost in hopes that they'll at some point they'll engage and kind of check up and be like, oh, how's that goal going? And you're like, oh, so it's like, yeah, it's like a self check, to make sure that you're on track. So I think, yeah, the more ways you can, for me, it was writing things down on a piece of paper and hanging them on the fridge. One thing I'm actually thinking about doing is actually getting like a whiteboard and writing them down. Maybe that's a little, might be better. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. I haven't made the investment on the whiteboard on Amazon yet, but for me that works. And I think it's beneficial. I mean, to each their own. So, but I think if you can write things down and kind of publicize it, then you're more likely to follow through.
Yeah, I find the same in the computer realm that I kind of play in. It's like building in public is what we call it, where you basically let people know your idea in public on Twitter or whatever, and you have a bunch of people around you who are either doing the same thing or holding you accountable or checking in on you, and you're checking in daily and pushing out the ugly code and the ugly outcomes that you stumble across along the way, just to hold yourself accountable so that you can get to the end goal of like publishing whatever it is you're trying to build. Yeah, I think it's really important. I think it's a good way to do it. The visualization thing, whether it's writing it down on a whiteboard or creating like a vision board, if you want to go crazy and do like, you know, scrapbooking and make a vision board. It seems a little esoteric, and it kind of is. It's like meditation. Like, does meditation really help you? Well, it does if you think it does, right? So it's almost a placebo effect of sorts, right?
The reason maybe people don't, right? Like, besides the fact that you know, there's no accountability measure, but I mean, there's fears to get over, right? The fear of failure, the fear of, you know, embarrassment or like abandonment. So there's all these fears why you don't publicize things, right? Just so you don't have to, I guess, feel repercussions if you don't achieve it. And I think it's just kind of getting over that mental hump, that a lot of people, including myself, kind of struggle with.
If you ever hit some stumbling points along the way in pursuit of your goals, how do you deal with the troughs, like the low points of the journey towards that goal? Do you have anything special that you do to get through any of those points? Do you like any self-talk or anything like that?
No, I mean, I think it's just you just got to accept that's part of the journey. Because I mean, I think the reason a lot of people don't start things is because they're afraid they're going to fail. But the thing you have to recognize is you're supposed to. Like, you're supposed to fail. Like, nobody, like, you know, picks up a baseball for the first time in their lives and throws the ball 100 miles an hour. Like, it's just not supposed to happen. Like, you get better from repetition and doing things over, and you probably gain a hell of a lot more from failing than you do from succeeding. So if you can just go in there and be like, no, I'm gonna fail. Like, I know it's inevitable. It's supposed to happen. Like, it's part of the process. Like, I go there expecting to fail. Like, I want to fail because I know I'm gonna learn what I did wrong so I can recover. And next time I won't fail because I learned from that experience. So I think it's just that. It's just kind of changing your mental kind of attitude that failure is not bad at all. I mean, you should almost like want to fail because it's the only way you're going to truly learn. I mean, you could read about things or listen about things, but until you're actually putting them into practice, you're not. I mean, the best analogy I've heard lately is, right, you could read for hours and hours about riding a bike, but you ain't going to learn how to ride a bike until you actually jump on the bike and try to go down the street. And you're going to fall off a couple times until you figure out the balance thing. But you just got to go out there and you just got to do it. I think, you know, half the battle is just showing up day after day. So yeah, I mean, there's been times, you know, I've, you know, failed a test or dropped the ball or something, or, you know, made a bad investment, or, you know, geez, the countless mistakes I've made just on DIY projects, and I hit the wrong pipe and water spraying everywhere. Like, it's just part of the process of just adulting and just growing up and growing and progressing. And so I think if you can just embrace that fear is part of life and it's part of the process, and every successful person that you've seen, like, they've failed probably more times than they can count. And that's, you know, it's inevitable, but yeah, just embrace it. And I think that's kind of the mentality you need to kind of just grow.
Any new goals on your retirement checklist that you've maybe added since we've talked last?
So kind of a pivotal one, I would say, for me, right, is I felt like I was kind of almost doing too much. Like, I wanted to have my hand in too many pots. So I kind of hunkered it down because I was kind of messing with the government contracting thing. That I also wanted to do real estate and then pursue policy. And I'm like, well, I was getting just overwhelmed. It was like too much. And so I'm like, well, let me put the contracting thing on the back burner. I'm really, you know, I'm going to focus on policy as, like, you know, my next W-2 job, my next everyday job. Like, I really still want to get into that just, you know, for fulfillment. But then, you know, my second job or my part-time job, I'm going to focus on kind of growing our real estate portfolio. So I think I kind of made that decision, to kind of take one thing off my plate, and I can actually focus my energy, you know, on growing our real estate portfolio. So I kind of made that decision. So that's what I'm going to go with. So I'm going to go with policy and real estate investor on the side in my spare time. So that was kind of a clarifying moment for me.
Yeah, it's always, I kind of feel the same way. It's like you think the thing to do is add more stuff to your plate and keep yourself busy and stay engaged. And you actually, like, that's why I'm glad you went and took some time off with your wife and took a couple weeks, because I know I was pushing on you from my end, and then you're doing all the retirement stuff and you're doing work stuff and you're going to these meetings at night. And um, I think it's really good that you took a little bit of a pause and step back. And I think also like there's some really good value in evaluating what's on your plate and then being able to take one thing off of it and understand that you can't do everything, right? You can do a lot of stuff, but if you chase two rabbits, you're never going to catch any rabbits. So you do have to balance your time out. Plus, getting a little bit older, like I think life starts to slow down a little bit around 40, 50, 60, somewhere in there. And you can actually think a little bit clearer and be not so anxious to like FOMO on everything, right? You can just be like, oh, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to miss that opportunity, but whatever. It's not a big deal. Like there's plenty of opportunities out here. Just got to be eyes open and be cognizant of which opportunities you actually want to take.
Yeah, so another interesting line I just heard, I think it was last week, is you can be an expert in anything, but you can't be an expert in everything. So you really just got to pick your pathway and just focus on it. So that's what that's gonna move forward with. So I'm pretty excited. Like I said, it was a busy week. So we got, we got back not the week before last, but then I actually had lunch with Terrence Hayes on Tuesday. So we went and met in person. Showed me around the VA a little bit, so that was kind of cool. So did that Tuesday for lunch. I went to Hill Vets on Tuesday night. Had some really great guest speakers. Connected with one of them. Actually, got to send him an email tonight because he wants to follow up. Then Wednesday night, I actually went to a local real estate investors meetup. So that was busy. And then I met with my mentor, Andrew, yesterday afternoon for coffee. So, keeping things going, growing my network, as much as I can, just trying to talk to people and getting more comfortable, just socializing and networking and trying to grow my network. And yeah, just back on the grind after a nice little short hiatus.
Yeah, I actually reached out to Terrence. I haven't heard anything back from him yet, but he's reached back out. Terrence, like, get a hold of me, man. Um, I'd love to have him on the show and interview him and just see like what's inside of his mind. He seems like such a really, really interesting person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's a great guy.
Any books you've ran across? I'm sure you probably read a bunch while you were on vacation as well, too.
Yeah, so I finished up the other one. So I'm on two more now. So one's kind of, so I figured I'm going to go kind of dual track, right? So I'll be focused on one for kind of personal development or personal or professional, and then one hopefully kind of working on my real estate investor development. So one I'm almost done. I think I got about an hour left of it, but Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Negotiating as if your life depended on it. So that's a good one. Really, it's really been insightful. So I'm hoping I can put that into practice here pretty soon. And then from an investor standpoint, I'm about halfway through with the BRRRR book by David Greene at Bigger Pockets. So it's also been very insightful. So that's what I'm working on now. So hopefully I'll finish Never Split the Difference here this week, and I'll move on to the next one. I'm thinking Atomic Habits might be the next one I get into, but we'll see.
I'm on James Clear's email thing. He sends out like an email every couple of days from Atomic. He's the author of Atomic Habits, but I haven't read the book yet. But the BRRRR book is really good. I've read that. That's for sure. That's a good one. It's a really good book.
Yeah. So the next one, so I bought like the 2-pack of David Greene. So after I'm done with this one, the other one I'm going to read, I think was his first one, which is like Out of State. It's like Out of State Landlord or something like that. So I'll be really interested. I am technically an out of state landlord now, but it's like I never had to develop, a project, like a rehab project or anything like that.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually put together a page on the Retired Army page /books where all the books from any of the podcasts that we mention are listed up there that you can take and go directly to Amazon and grab them if you need to. So I'll definitely add those on there. I think one of them's already on there, but the other two I'll add on for sure. Yeah, cool, man. Yeah, we've gone a little bit over time, but it's all good. I appreciate you hanging out with me again. And
oh, no problem.
Anybody else out there, if you need to, we'll have timestamps and probably some short videos of some of the stuff. So it's a little bit more compact and trying to make it as easily digestible as possible for everybody out there. But I appreciate you sticking with me and sticking with Justin. And we will see you again next time. Have a great one. Talk to you later.
All right. Thanks. You too.